Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we are going to do a deep dive into the world of iced coffee.
Ooh, iced coffee. Sounds refreshing.
Right. And, our listeners are clearly interested in this. We got a ton of questions about iced coffee, about the health benefits, the potential downsides, and the best ways to brew it at home.
That is a lot to cover. So, where are we starting?
We're going to be looking at an article we found from Coffee at Corner, and they actually kick things off with something that really surprised me.
Oh, what's that?
They make a distinction between iced tea coffee and iced coffee.
Hmm. Icy coffee versus iced coffee. Is there really a difference? I mean, it's all just coffee with ice, right?
Well, according to Coffee at Corner, icy coffee refers specifically to cold brew or drip coffee poured over ice.
Okay, that makes sense, I guess. What about iced coffee then?
That's where it gets interesting. Iced coffee is basically just hot coffee with ice thrown in. Kind of like what you might do with leftover coffee.
Uh-huh. So it's like a quick fix for a cold drink, but wouldn't that make it kind of watered down?
Exactly. And that actually leads into one of the article's warnings about homemade iced coffee. They say that a lot of times it ends up being too watery because of all the melting ice.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, those ice cubes are just going to melt and dilute the coffee. It's like basic science, right?
Right. And it's not just about the strength of the coffee, but it can also affect the flavor.
Totally. So I guess the key is to minimize that dilution as much as possible.
Exactly. And the article gives some tips on how to do that. One of them is to use, well, this one sounded kind of strange to me, but they suggest using water instead of ice.
Wait a minute, using water instead of ice? How does that even work? Isn't the whole point to have those ice cubes in there?
Well, they're talking about the kind of ice you use. See, if you brew your coffee directly over ice made from water, you're just going to end up with a weaker drink because all that water is melting into it.
Oh, I see. So are they saying we should use like those fancy whiskey stones for coffee?
Not exactly, but that's a good thought. The suggestion is to actually brew your coffee over ice made from coffee. So as the ice melts, it's just adding more coffee to your drink.
Oh, wow. That's brilliant. I never would have thought of that.
Me neither. I mean, it sounds a little crazy at first, but it actually makes a lot of sense. Speaking of doing things a little differently, the article also highlights this idea of adding more coffee grounds for a stronger drink.
Well, that's not really a groundbreaking tip.
Right. If I'm craving iced coffee, I'm definitely going for that extra caffeine boost.
Exactly. But I think what they're trying to emphasize is that you don't have to settle for a weak, watery iced coffee.
Mm.
You have the power to control the strength by adjusting the amount of coffee you use.
You're right. It's about taking charge of your iced coffee destiny.
Haha, exactly. Now, before we move on to the actual brewing methods, there's one thing in the article that really caught my eye. They actually claim that iced coffee can keep you up at night.
Yeah, I saw that too. But isn't that true of any coffee, hot or cold? Caffeine is caffeine, right?
Well, yeah, you're not wrong. But I think what they're getting at is that the caffeine content in iced coffee can sometimes be even higher than in hot coffee, especially when it comes to cold brew.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's not just about the temperature, but also the brewing method and how it affects the caffeine extraction.
Exactly. And they actually dive deeper into these different methods later in the article. They talk about cold brew, iced
Wow.
coffee, and even the iced latte.
Oh, yeah. And speaking of cold brew, I feel like that's become the trendy darling of the coffee world lately.
Mm.
But I have to admit, I don't really know what makes it so special.
Well, it all comes down to the extraction process. Cold brew involves steeping coffee grounds in cold or room temperature water for an extended period, sometimes even a whole day.
Whoa, a whole day. That's a lot of patience.
It is, but it results in a coffee concentrate that's known for being super smooth and way less acidic than regular
So
coffee.
it's gentler on the stomach.
Exactly.
Mm.
And a lot of people find it less bitter and more flavorful too.
Hmm. I'm definitely intrigued now. But before we get too deep into cold brew, let's touch on regular iced coffee. You know, the kind where you just pour hot coffee over ice.
Yeah.
Anything special to know about that method?
Well, it might seem super basic, but the key here is to use good quality coffee. Like, you really don't want to just use any old leftovers for this.
Ah, so it's all about starting strong.
Yep, you need a coffee that can stand up to that dilution from the melting ice. And don't forget about the ice itself.
Oh, right. We talked about that earlier. Bigger ice cubes, right.
Exactly. The slower they melt, the better your iced coffee is going to taste.
This is making me want to go on an ice cube shopping spree.
Uh-huh. Well, maybe not that extreme, but it's definitely something to keep in mind. Now, we've talked about icy as coffee and iced coffee, but what about the fancier cousin, the iced latte?
Oh, yes. That's my go-to when I'm feeling a little fancy.
So what makes a perfect iced latte? Well, you got to start with a great espresso. That's the foundation.
Makes sense. So you need an espresso machine for this one.
Yep. And then you add your milk. You can use dairy or non-dairy, whatever you prefer. And of course, the ice.
So it's like a regular latte, but cold. What about all those fancy swirls and designs I see baristas making? Is that even possible at home?
Oh, yeah, definitely. It takes practice, of course, but
Yeah.
you can totally create latte art at home. You'll need a milk frother to get that smooth, velvety texture, and then it's all about the pouring technique.
Hmm. I might need to invest in a milk frother then. This is all making me seriously crave an iced latte right now. But before we all rush out for our caffeine fix, let's take a peek at the article's FAQ section. There are always some hidden gems in there.
Good idea. What stood out to you in this one?
Well, they mentioned that some people actually find iced coffee less tasty than hot coffee.
Really? That's interesting. Why do you think that is?
I guess it could be because of that difference in flavor profiles that we talked about earlier. The cold brew being smoother and less acidic. Maybe some people just missed that bold, strong taste of hot coffee.
Yeah, I can see that. It's like some people love dark chocolate and others prefer milk chocolate. It's all about personal preference.
Right. And speaking of preferences, another FAQ point mentioned that iced coffee is great for social gatherings.
I can definitely see that. It's refreshing, it looks great in a tall glass, and you can easily customize it with different flavors and milk options.
It's like a party in a glass.
Yeah.
This actually brings up an interesting thought. We've been focusing on the practical aspects of iced coffee, but there's also a whole social and cultural side to it.
No, absolutely. Iced coffee has become more than just a drink. It's a ritual, a way to connect with people, a symbol of summer.
It's true. It's like it has a whole vibe of its own. It'd be interesting to explore that deeper meaning behind our iced coffee obsession.
That's a great idea. But I think for today, we've given our listeners plenty to think about.
You're right. We've covered a lot of ground, from the basics of brewing to the environmental impact of our coffee choices. But before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with one last thought.
Okay, hit me with it.
While we've talked about making iced coffee at home, a lot of us still rely on our favorite coffee shops for our daily dose. So how do we make sure we're getting a quality, non-watered down iced coffee when we're not the ones making it?
Hmm, that is a good question. I guess we'll have to save that for next time.
You're right. Looks like we have even more to explore in the world of iced coffee.
Stay tuned, everyone.
Until then, happy sipping.
All right, so are you ready to dive into the actual brewing methods?
Absolutely. I'm especially curious about cold brew. You mentioned earlier it takes like a whole day to make. I mean, where do I even begin?
Well, the first thing is you need to grind your coffee beans coarsely.
Okay, coarse grind it is. What about the coffee to water ratio?
A good starting point is 1.8. So for every 1 cup of coffee grounds, you'll use 8 cups of water.
Okay, got it. 1.8. So then what? Do I just dump everything into a regular coffee maker?
Not quite. You'll need a container like a French press or a large mason jar, something with a lid to seal it up tight.
Okay, makes sense. Got to keep all those flavors in. Then what?
Once you've got your coffee grounds and water in the container, give it a good stir to make sure all the grounds are wet, then seal it up and pop it in the fridge.
And then we wait.
And then we wait. Ideally, you want to let it steep for at least 12 hours, but 24 is even better.
Wow, that's a long time. What happens if I, forget about it and leave it in there for longer?
Well, if you go way too long, it might get a little too bitter, but a little extra time won't hurt.
Okay, so no need to set an alarm clock then. So after all that waiting, what's next?
Time to strain. You can use a fine mesh filter or even cheesecloth.
Ah, so we're getting rid of all those grounds.
Exactly. You want a nice, smooth concentrate.
Okay, so now I've got this magical cold brew concentrate. What's the best way to enjoy it? Do I drink it straight?
You can if you like it super strong, but most people dilute it with water or milk.
So I can basically customize the strength to my liking. What about ice? Is that a must-have for cold brew?
It's definitely the classic way to serve it, but
Uh-huh.
you can totally enjoy it chilled without ice.
This is making me so excited to try making my own cold brew. But before I go full barista mode, what about regular iced coffee? The kind you make with hot coffee.
Ah, yes, the classic iced coffee. Still a great option if you need a quick fix. Remember what we said before about using good quality coffee? That's super important here.
Right, got to start strong to avoid that watery mess.
Exactly. And don't forget those ice cubes. Bigger is better.
Got it. Big ice cubes for the win. Okay, and now for the real treat, the iced latte.
Ah, yes, the queen of iced coffee drinks. So you'll need an espresso machine for this one. It's all about that espresso base.
Right, gotta have that rich, intense flavor. So once I've got my espresso shot, what's next?
Milk and ice. You can use any kind of milk you like, dairy or non-dairy.
So it's pretty straightforward then.
Right.
Espresso, milk, ice boom, ice latte.
It is, but here's a tip for that perfect layered look. Add the ice last.
Oh, so you don't just dump everything in at once. Good to know.
And if you want to get really fancy, you can try your hand at some latte art.
Ooh, yeah. Those swirls and designs are so cool. I'm gonna need a milk frother for that, right?
Yep, a milk frother will be your best friend for latte art.
Add it to the shopping list. Okay, so we've covered the brewing methods. Now, what about storage? Like, if I make a big batch of cold brew concentrate, how long will it last?
Cold brew is a champ when it comes to storage. Just keep it in an airtight container in your fridge, and it should be good for up to a week.
Perfect.
Hmm.
No need to worry about it going bad quickly. Now, we've been talking a lot about making iced coffee at home, but what about the bigger picture? I mean, all this coffee consumption has got to have some kind of impact on the environment, right?
That's a great point, and it's something we should all be more mindful of.
So what can we do to be more eco-friendly with our iced coffee habits?
Well, for starters, we can choose sustainably sourced coffee beans, look for certifications like fair trade or organic.
Right. It's about knowing where your coffee comes from and how it's produced.
And of course, we can all do our part by reducing waste, like using reusable cups and straws instead of those disposable ones.
Yeah, all those little things add up.
They do. And hey, even those coffee grounds can be recycled. You can compost them or even use them in some DIY beauty recipes.
Wow, I never thought of that. See, there are so many ways to make our iced coffee habit more sustainable.
Exactly. It's all about making those conscious choices.
Well said. Okay, so we've talked about brewing, storage, and sustainability. Before we wrap up this part, I have one more question that's been on my mind.
Okay, what is it?
A lot of us get our iced coffee fix from coffee shops, so how can we make sure we're getting a good quality drink?
Yeah.
One that's not watered down or just blah.
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? I guess we'll have to unravel that mystery next time.
Stay tuned, everyone. We'll be right back. All right, so last time we left off with a pretty big question. How do we make sure we're getting a quality iced coffee when we're not the ones brewing it? At those coffee shops we all love.
It's a tough one, right? I mean, we can control every step of the process at home. But when we're at a coffee shop, it's kind of like a mystery. It is a bit of a gamble sometimes, but there are actually some things you can do to tip the scales in your favor.
Okay, I'm all ears. Give me those insider secrets.
Well, first and foremost, don't be afraid to ask questions.
Like what?
Start by asking about the type of coffee they use for their iced drinks. Do they use cold brew, drip coffee, or espresso as the base? Each method produces a different flavor profile and caffeine strength.
Right. We talked about all that earlier. I guess I never really thought to ask about those details when ordering.
It can make a huge difference in your final drink, though. And don't hesitate to ask about milk options, too. If you're watching your calorie intake, they probably have low-fat or non-dairy alternatives.
Those are good points.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to be more assertive with my iced coffee orders from now on. No more settling for mystery drinks.
And another thing you can ask about, the ice.
The ice, really?
Yeah. You can ask if they use coffee ice cubes, or even if they pre-chill their glasses to prevent too much melting.
Wow, I never thought of that. So I can basically become an iced coffee detective asking all these questions.
Exactly. A good barista will appreciate your attention to detail, and they'll want to make sure you get a great drink.
That's good to know. So it's all about being informed and speaking up.
Precisely. Now, as we wrap up this deep dive into iced coffee, I'm struck by how this drink has really become more than just a beverage.
It has, hasn't it? It's like a cultural phenomenon, a ritual, a way of life even.
I mean, think about it. Iced coffee has permeated every corner of our society. It's in movies, on TV, all over social media. There are entire businesses dedicated to it.
And there's something so appealing about those images of people enjoying their iced coffee, whether they're catching up with friends or just taking a break from the hustle and bustle. It's like a little moment of peace and happiness.
I think you're right. And in a world that's increasingly fast-paced and chaotic, those small moments of joy become even more precious.
They do. And, we've talked about the taste, the brewing methods, the sustainability aspect. But ultimately, I think it's that feeling of enjoyment and connection that makes iced coffee so special.
Absolutely. It's a reminder to slow down, savor the moment, and appreciate the simple things in life.
Well said. So as we come to the end of our iced coffee journey, What are your final thoughts?
I'm just really grateful for this drink. It brings people together, it sparks conversations, it provides a much needed energy boost, and it's undeniably delicious. What more could you ask for?
I couldn't agree more. It's been a fascinating deep dive, and I hope our listeners have enjoyed exploring the world of iced coffee with us.
Yeah, me too. And remember, there's always more to learn and discover. So keep experimenting, keep asking questions, and most importantly, keep enjoying your iced coffee.
Cheers to that. And until next time, happy sipping, everyone.
Yeah.